What's up, everyone? It's Friday again, and that means it's time for another episode of this new weekly podcast type thing that I've been doing. Now, if this is your first time tuning into this, basically I just kind of talk about articles that I find, or I go over some stories that I find, and we try to just have a good time. It's way less structured than most of my other videos. There's no gaps in between the stories. It's more conversational. So, this week, I'm going to talk about weird stuff on the job. Now, we've all had that job where things just don't feel right, and that's not just because of other employees or your boss. That's because that there seems to be something else going on at the place. So, in this episode, I'm going to go over some of them, and I'm going to talk about some of my own at jobs that I've worked at, and we'll just try to have a good time here. So, first off, this guy was working at a motel that was on a freeway next to a Denny's. It was obviously the night shift, because usually all this stuff happens in the dead of the night. It was just him and the cleaning staff at first here. He says usually the cleaning staff never really bring attention to themselves, but one night, one of the women asks him if he'll help her with one of the rooms. He thinks this is odd because usually they never ask him to do anything. But he obliges, he joins her, and he thinks that maybe she found something in there, or maybe something serious is going on. So he goes into the room, and there's not really anything out of the ordinary. But he helps her clean the room, and then they both leave. And this begins to happen almost every night, and usually just after somebody is leaving the room after they check out. And this happens more and more to the point where he's confused and he actually asks one of the cleaning ladies just what's going on. And she says that a few of them have had the same experience in that room. They walk into this room that's supposed to be empty. They start to clean. The lights begin to flicker. They look around. And then there's a man sitting on the edge of the bed. It's usually dark in this room, but the man is made up of shadows and kind of looks to be naked. So you can see how this would be very terrifying for someone, especially a cleaner, to just go in there and see that. The cleaning lady always quickly leaves after this, and then they tell him that this always happens when the room is supposed to be empty. There are no guests registered to be in that room. So the guy's first thought is that there's some pervert guy that's sneaking into the room and just doing this to, some weird prank to get off on or something. So he tells them to let him know when they're going to clean that room, and he'll keep an eye on the cameras. And then one night, he is doing something and he's away from the monitors. And then one of the cleaning ladies runs up to him and tells him that it happened again. He rushes over to the room. It's empty. And then he goes and checks the cameras. It's empty again. There's no proof of anybody ever being in there. In fact, on the camera, when the woman walks in, the lights flicker, and she runs out scared after looking over at the bed. So what do you think was going on here? Do you think it was just a simple case of a ghost? A simple case of maybe a poltergeist? Or do you think it was another entity, like a shadow person, or something like that? Because it only happens whenever the lights go out. So that tells me that whatever this is drawing off of the electricity. And a lot of entities like this seem to feed off of that. So this is why I wonder if it's just a regular ghost, or is it something else? Let me know what you think down in the comments. Now, as for me, a lot of my jobs have been generally with the public, whether it be retail, construction, or something else like that. One of my shifts one time ended at 11 p.m. or 12 p.m. or 12 a.m. I guess, but it ended at right around 11 or midnight, and sometimes it would be perfectly okay, everything would be going good, and then there's sometimes just things would get real weird, I guess is the best word for it. So this would have been years ago now, but I'm working one of these shifts. I think it was the one that's until 12. So I think at this specific time I was like stocking cereal or something like that. And if you don't know, cereal comes in boxes, yes, but it comes in a bigger box that's full of it. And this is relevant because I was carrying like a few of them on a cart and I couldn't see around it, but like I knew what aisle I was going to, so it didn't really matter. And I was alone in the store. So I'm going down the aisle and I see somebody with a cart walking down at the end of the aisle near there's like freezers and stuff down there. So I see them walking by there and I'm like, that's weird. It is 10:30 p.m. The store closes at 9. Why is there somebody else in here? At first, I tried to rationalize this. I thought, okay, maybe the front end manager came in late or was staying late and I just didn't see her when I locked the door, and maybe she's shopping for herself. And then I thought, well, no, she never does this. Why would she be doing it at 10:30 at night? So this is when I dropped the boxes that were on my cart and I thought, okay, I should probably figure out who this is. So I go around the corner and as you can imagine, there's nobody there. There's nobody up the other aisles, there's nobody around the back aisle, there's just nobody. It's just me. If I can remember right, I even went out and looked out back just to be sure, because you just never know. I've had people just come out back when they weren't supposed to, thinking they can just do that. But there was nobody out there too, so it was just really weird. And I thought, alright, maybe I'm overtired. Maybe I'm, seeing things or whatever. Maybe it was my own reflection in the freezer and the way the cart looked was weird or something. I don't know. But what I do is I take one earphone out in case something happens, because by this point I'm a little on edge but still trying to just get it done. And I go back down the aisle and I start opening up the cereal or whatever, and I've talked about this on the channel before, but I believe it was corn pops or honeycomb or something I was putting on the shelf when I heard the cart again, and I looked over, and down near the end of the aisle, which was only about 10-15 feet from me, there was a woman standing there with a cart, and I couldn't make out her face. Her whole body was blurry almost. Her face was blurry. I couldn't make out anything. And she didn't do anything. She just stood there and looked at me. And everything I was seeing was telling me that this person wasn't a normal person. But for some reason, it's like the customer service in you just kind of comes out. So you're just like, yeah, do you need to find anything? And I don't know why I did that, but I did. And the woman just kind of kept going with her cart down the other aisle. And then I was like, whoa, wait a second. There's not supposed to be anybody else in here. And then I yelled out, the store's closed. You need to leave. But, of course, when I went around the corner, there was nobody there. But what was really creepy, and I think I mentioned this before, it was that I did find a cart that was slightly ajar from the rest of them. And that just gave me the heebie-jeebies even more. Because when I went over to look at the cart, it was ice cold to the touch. And yeah, it was a pretty spooky experience. Oh, I guess a funny one, real quick before I move on, was, so when the store closes, we have to turn off the lights of the coolers and stuff because, it just saves power. And every now and then, the back freezer would just, you turn, because it would usually be the first one that I would turn off, and then I would go around the store. But every now and then, I would go around the store, and that one would just be on again, or be flickering or something weird. And one night in particular, I was sick, my feet were hurting, I had a headache, my back was hurting, I just wanted to go home. So I literally went and turned it off again, and I said, can you just F off for tonight? I'm not feeling it. And I swear from behind me, I heard a sigh. It's like a, okay, kind of thing. I thought that was a little funny. But, yeah, let's move on. So in this one, a guy says that he was a night shift security guard. He was working in a nice office building in a pretty nice neighborhood. He says that it was just him and one other guard in the entire building. There was no crime, no problems. It was basically just screw around on the internet all night and do your rounds when you have to. The building itself only has a couple cameras. There's one in the parking lot and one on the first floor. So if you're on any other floor, you just kind of walk around and do whatever. The guy says that it was the cushiest job that he's ever had. There was flat screen TVs, Wi-Fi, a gym, expensive coffee machines, and a whole bunch of other stuff. But also, every single door was locked by a key card for obvious security reasons, and at this point, he just started his shift. He went to the second floor. He noticed that somebody had left a light on in the south wing. Now, a lot of lights are motion activated in this building, but this specific one just uses a light switch, and he says it happens sometimes, so he just turns it off and goes back to doing his quick patrol so he can get back to basically doing nothing on the internet. So he finishes up, and eventually the other security guard goes to do his patrol. And then we fast forward about 3 hours. He's been sitting a while, he wants to go stretch his legs, so he decides to go on another patrol. He goes to the second floor, the south wing. There's a motion sensing light that's on, and it's right next to the light switch that he turned off 3 hours prior, which is still off. And then he thinks, these motion lights are only supposed to stay on for 15 minutes, and him and the other guard have been sitting next to each other for the last hour. So he goes back to the security room to tell the other guard about it and ask if he knows what's up with it. This other security guard says that when he was in there, the light switch was on, and he turned it off himself. And now, as previously mentioned, this guy had turned off that light switch on his patrol when he first started. Now he says that he hasn't seen anything. This is the other security guard. But since there's no security cameras on the second floor, they don't really have any idea what could have activated this light. So, our guy decides to go back up to the second floor to check it out again, and he tells the other guard that if he doesn't hear from him soon, to call his cell phone. Now, the company that they work for never did issue them security radios, because remember, this place has no crime, there's never been any issues at this place. So he goes up to the second floor and sees that the light switch is back in the on position, and the motion sensing light is still on. At this point, the guy is getting very concerned. He considers just going down the stairs and calling the police. But he figures that if it turns out to be nothing, he's going to look like a huge dickhead calling the police for that when there's really nothing going on. In his head, the headline reads, "Security guard calls police because the light switch was in the wrong position," and he just decides to check out more of the south wing. And then he hears something, a loud banging noise. He jumps and kind of starts to get a little on edge. Then he remembers that when the AC comes on, it makes this large banging noise. So he laughs it off, calms down, and checks out the rest of the wing. This only takes another 5 or 10 minutes, and during that time he finds no signs of intruders at all. All the doors are locked tight, nothing's broken or missing, and he looks at his watch and sees that he's been up there for about 20 minutes now. So what he's wondering, he's like, man, why didn't the other guy call me? I told him to. He leans up against an air vent and takes out his phone and starts going through his contacts. But then he realizes something else. The air vent and the AC isn't going. It's not blowing any air. This means that the bang came from something else. So he calls the other guard's phone. There's no answer. He swears to himself and then locks himself in an office, calls 911. He tells the dispatcher what happened. The dispatcher asks where he is and tells them, and then he tells them that the cops are on their way. And then the dispatcher asks if the police will be able to get into the building by themselves. And then he's thinking, crap, all the doors are locked and they need a key card to get through. So he's just sprinting through the building down to the main entrance, runs outside, waits for the cops while still on the phone with 911. He says it feels like it takes forever, but the cops get there, and he lets them in and brings them to the security room. But the other guard is gone. There's no sign of him at all. The computer that displays the security cameras is turned off even. He gives each of the cops a spare security card so they can search the building too. But when they search the whole building, they still don't find the other guy. And supposedly this guy's car is still parked in the parking lot that night. So now, what do you think happened to the other security guard? Did he just simply say, screw it, I'm done with this job, my car's a piece of junk, and just walk off into like a new life or something? Was it like some other stories that you hear where the person like gets into an elevator and they're just never seen again? Why was the computer off? And what was that banging noise? Basically, if this whole story is true, then it's really creepy for one, and two, there's just a security guard that's missing, maybe somewhere out there stuck in another dimension, I don't know. And I do have a story that somebody told me. Now, nobody goes missing in this story, but it has the same creepy vibe. It wasn't in an old office building, it was in an old school. Now, schools are often the same kind of thing as hospitals. There's so many people coming and going, there's so many emotions happening, that it can kind of turn into its own little liminal space, or, I don't know, different, basically. A school and a hospital are different from a hotel or an office building. The whole vibe is all different, especially at night, and especially when they're empty. Now, the guy that told me this story is a janitor at this old school, or he was working there at the time anyways. He doesn't work there now. But he said that he was down in what would be considered like a basement area. There's still classrooms down there, but it's like a basement area of this school. And he was doing his rounds, sweeping the floor, making sure there were no people in there. I almost said kids, but it was like 9:30 at night. So definitely just, if there's any teachers left, tell them that, like, you know, you should go home. But he's down in like the basement area, sweeping up and just finishing up what he's doing, going to like the janitor's closet, making sure everything's all filled out and all that. Then he hears whispering. And he hears whispering in the hallway that's next to this little janitor's closet. So he goes out thinking like, oh great, there's like teenagers that snuck their way in here or whatever. So he searches around the whole area, and there's nobody. But he can still hear this whispering, and it's always like coming from right behind him. He can never make out what's being said, but it's definitely somebody whispering. So eventually, he ends up back down in the basement again, thinking like, okay, I'm obviously just hearing things. Maybe I'm tired. So there's a spotlight that is used for like plays and stuff, because this is like an auditorium area. And just outside of the spotlight, he can see someone standing there. They're all shadowy, and it looks like that they're down on all fours and they're crawling across the floor. This whole sight makes the hair on the back of his neck stand up. He takes out his phone flashlight. He shines it in the direction, but it's like the phone flashlight just doesn't pierce the darkness. He would have just turned around and said screw it, but the problem was the exit that he had to use was down that hallway and up those stairs, and he had to go by whatever this was. Now he said what he did was he just started saying the rosary or the Lord's Prayer or whatever, and he had his phone flashlight on, and there was no lights on besides that one spotlight that he didn't know how to turn off, so he just left it. But he's walking down the hallway, and he can feel this thing, this like nipping at his heels, just like waiting for the chance to pounce on him. And he's still having the same issue with his phone. He says that it was so dark in that hallway that it felt like his phone was just doing nothing. It was so dark that he tripped on the stairs when he got to them. And when he was running up the stairs, he said it felt like that something was trying to pull him back down. But he obviously got up the stairs because he told me this story. And when he got up the stairs into the entranceway, it's like everything just went away. As soon as he crossed the threshold of that doorway into the entrance, everything was normal again. his phone light was working, the moon was shining in through the window, and yeah. He said that whole experience was one of the reasons why he hasn't been out to that school again, and to be honest, I don't blame him. Now, if you liked this episode of the podcast about work stories, be sure to like and subscribe. And if you would like to support the channel on PayPal or Patreon, then there's links for that in the description below. Of course, there's super thanks here on YouTube, and even then, just watching the video and commenting and liking and sharing, that really helps. And it's free. So with that, I will see you on Sunday for a video about Alaska. So make sure to tune in for that one. It's going to be crazy. And yeah, thank you for pulling up a stump, and thank you for watching this episode of the podcast.